Welcome everyone to the weekly Newsroom session with Kathryn Arndt, the CEO of the VLGA, joining us for our weekly chat. Hi Kathryn.
Hi Chris, how are you today?
I'm going well, thanks. What about you?
No, not too bad. Just another big week in local government, and I think we were just reflecting, the both of us, that a holiday would be nice, but it's just 24/7. So I think if we stumble over a few words by the time we get to this end of the week program, we can be forgiven.
It does feel like we've just been going and going and going for so long, and we always talk about what a big week it's been, but you've had the opportunity to meet already with the new local government minister.
I have. I've just come from that meeting, and I must say that was an incredibly productive meeting, and the minister was very generous with his time and showed genuine interest in what was some of the key issues for the sector, particularly from a governance perspective, because of course that's where the VLGA does focus a lot of its activity. And we talked about the opportunity of the new Act being principles-based to address some of those governance issues, but of course the guidance material that sits behind that will be incredibly important. And we acknowledge the very difficult role that CEOs have in the sector as well, managing multi-million-dollar businesses, delivering services, but also having a group of elected representatives that they have to work very closely with and on a daily basis also. So I found the Minister was asking very sensible questions, and I'll have some updates too for our viewers on the electoral regulations.
So did he give you a sense of what's at the top of his pile in terms of priority? Because I know the electoral regulations are obviously one of them. There's been a reactivation of people talking about whether the election should go ahead given lockdowns are coming back, etc. Did you get into any of that with him?
Look, we did, and I think it should come to no surprise to the sector that the Local Government Act and the provisions within that were passed through Parliament, both the lower and upper house. So I think the minister has a sense that, although he's come into this portfolio, given the process has been undertaken and the legislation passed, that we do need to proceed, and he needs to proceed with overseeing the implementation of that Act, working with LGV and the peaks and the sector more broadly to make sure that we can meet those critical timelines. Of course, the issue of the elections I know has come up again, certainly not something that I got a sense the minister was reconsidering. There are a number of legislative processes that sit around that are certainly outside of his control also. And from the CEO's perspective in the sector, I think because they're really at the front line or managing services that are at the front line during this pandemic, for them to then be further distracted by a potential postponement. We've got councillors who are extremely fatigued, who really just do want to step down. And of course, we have members of the community who've been waiting for their opportunity to participate in a democratic process of a local government election. So I have a sense that the electoral regulations that are being drafted and that we're eagerly waiting for will accommodate as much as possible a situation where we still might find ourselves, unfortunately, in some sort of lockdown situation, but will allow the mandatory training to be delivered and also allow for candidates to lodge their nomination form in a way other than in person. Yeah. I can't be quoted on that, I haven't seen them yet, but I have a sense that the government is preparing for all scenarios.
And on the governance update this week with Stephen Cooper, we talk about some of those issues, and his mail is that those regulations are, his words, imminently imminent. So we are watching and waiting for those. Just want to take your mind back to Monday, Kathryn. We had one of our best live panel sessions, a webinar on deliberative engagement with some terrific speakers and lots of good interaction with the audience.
Yes, unfortunately I couldn't make that, but I know, Chris, we had about 120 odd people in the audience. It was a hot topic because of the community engagement principles contained within the new Act, and certainly the feedback to date has been very positive.
Indeed. Good, as I said, good interaction. And I think one of those topics that everyone's just coming to grasps with in local government, that it's coming, it's here to stay. We really need to understand as best possible how we comply with the Act and introduce these practices. And there will be more of those. So we're looking at our webinar series focusing on those practical issues about how do you comply as the elements of the Act come into effect.
Yeah, there certainly will be some opportunities to have some follow-up discussions about that, and I think they'll be well received too.
You also had a live panel this week with Women's Health Loddon, which I wasn't present for, but how did that go?
Look, that was a terrific turnout. Again, we had close to 100 participants in the audience, and that's a partnership that the VLGA has with, well, through our partnership with Gen Vic, who's the peak body for the local women health networks throughout Victoria. This was a pilot program with Loddon Mallee. We had Ali Cupper MP on the panel, Tricia Curry, who's the CEO of Loddon Mallee Health, Women's Health, and also Kate Burke, who was the founder of Agri Business, I believe, talking about the role of women in politics as picking up in their role as community leaders already in these rural regional communities, and encouraging them to stand in local government elections. So it was a lovely conversation, and there'll be hopefully a few more of those throughout the state.
Kathryn, another component of the candidate training that's happening between now and the election is the Your Community, Country and Council program. Have you got a bit of an update on what's happening with that?
Yes, so there's been a few podcasts that Charles Picano has facilitated on the VLGA's behalf. And if I just check my notes, I think we have a couple of sessions coming up, 3 sessions, which will be an online Zoom session, particularly targeting Aboriginal Victorians to give them a sense of the role of local government, to encourage their participation both as a voter, but also to consider standing as for a councillor position.
Indeed, so very important. Look out for those and participate if that's appropriate for you. And in terms of what's coming ahead with VLGA Connect, our next live panel session is taking shape, Kathryn. You've got a terrific relationship with Infrastructure Victoria, and they've looked to the VLGA to share the advice that they've recently finalised to government around the recycling and resource recovery sector.
Yes, that's right. Our viewers might remember we had the CEO, Michel Masson, on the program, well, probably a month ago now, and he reached out and was very keen through the partnership we have with them to take the opportunity to have his team talk to the sector in a live panel about that submission. They've done a lot of work in providing, as an independent, think tank and research on the topic of infrastructure, a lot of advice to government, and this particular issue of waste and resource recovery is, of course, one of the many top of mind issues for the local government sector. So looking forward to that Monday week, I believe.
Monday week, so the 13th of July at 2 p.m, we have joining us from Infrastructure Victoria, Jonathan Spear, Dr. Jonathan Spear, who's the Deputy CEO, and Alyssa McNamara, who's been the Project Director for this particular piece of work, which is around, I think there's 13 recommendations about how all levels of government, business and households can be working together to bring the best possible outcomes in terms of the recycling and resource recovery sector in Victoria. Obviously, infrastructure is going to be a big part of that. So I think particularly for those people in local government that interface with that as a concept, but also as have involvement in delivering those sorts of services, it'll be a very important conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I must see.
Kathryn, that's all we have time for this week. I hope you've got a pleasant, relaxing weekend planned.
I'm hoping so, Chris, and you also. Now, I've been asked to mention, or at least ask you, what your music release radar is today?
Oh, actually, I'm very happy with my music release radar today because there's some new material from some artists that I very much enjoy. It's very country music flavoured, of course. But you sound like you're not familiar with the release radar, Kathryn.
Oh, how could you tell?
It's pretty obvious. So Spotify releases a release radar every Friday, and they use a little bit of the what's the word? The artificial intelligence to predict what sorts of music or what songs you might like to hear and present you with a playlist of about 30 songs there. And often they're a little bit amiss. I'd like to work out how to stop anything with the word remix in it from appearing in my release radar. But other than that, it's pretty good.
Oh, I'll have to have a look at that then.
Indeed. And off the top of my head, I can't remember who was on it this morning, but I did play it first thing and quite enjoyed some of the new tracks. So thank you for the question without notice. And I look forward to catching up with you next Friday for another Newsroom update.
Looking forward to it, Chris. Take care.
Kathryn Arndt joining me as she does each week at this time for the Newsroom segment here on VLGA Connect.